What's going on, Bombad fam? Welcome to this very detailed, very thorough video essay that I've crafted on midi-chlorians and understanding the Force. Very lucky to know that I've got people that want to watch this, or if you're a newcomer, make sure you like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends if they're, still having some misconceptions on midi-chlorians. I can guarantee you this will clear up any thoughts that you may have that are ill will toward this aspect of Star Wars. So without further ado, glad to have you here. Hope you enjoy and stay bombad. When I was 18, I was in an automobile accident and went through a near-death experience. I was actually taken away from the scene, presumed dead, and it wasn't until I reached the hospital that the doctors revived my heartbeat and brought me back to life. This is the kind of experience that molds people's beliefs, but I have found that most of my conclusions have evolved from observing life since that time. If I have come to know anything, it's that these questions are as unknowable for us as they would be for a tree or for an ant. Scholars who have studied myth and religion for many years and have connected all of the theories spawned over the ages about life and consciousness, and who have taken away the superficial trappings, have come up with the same sensibility. They call it different things. They try to personify it and deal with it in different ways. But everybody seems to dress down the fact that life cannot be explained. The only reason for life is life. There is no why. We are. Life is beyond reason. One might think of life as a large organism, and we are all but a small symbiotic part of it. It is possible that on a spiritual level, we are all connected in a way that continues beyond the comings and goings of various life forms. My best guess is that we share a collective spirit, or a life force, or consciousness that encompasses and goes beyond the individual life forms. There's a part of us that connects to other humans, connects to other animals, connects to plants, connects to the planet, connects to the universe. I don't think that we can understand it through any kind of verbal, written, or intellectual means. But I do believe that we all know this, even if it's on a level beyond our normal conscious thoughts. If we have a meaningful place in this process, it is to try to fit into a healthy, symbiotic relationship with other life forms. Everybody ultimately is trying to reach a harmony with the other parts of the life force. And in trying to figure out what life is all about, we ultimately come down to the expressions of compassion and love, helping the rest of the life force, caring about others without any conditions or expectations, without expecting to get anything in return. This is expressed in every religion by every prophet. George Lucas's foreword from the Star Wars Archive novel by Paul Duncan. We have some images of George Lucas from the set of American Graffiti, him as a young man, and of course the infamous newspaper title, The Modesto Bee, showing his almost near-fatal car crash. Understanding the Importance of Midi-chlorians in the Force, a video essay by me, Scotty J. Rowe. Ever since the introduction of these microscopic organisms in Star Wars, there have been fans with consistent misinterpretations of their importance in our understanding of the Force. Midi-chlorians are one of the most underrated plot devices in all of Star Wars, and they affect our interpretation of the entire saga, but in particular, the function and purpose of the Force. Therefore, I will do my best to categorize all this information on midi-chlorians in terms of Star Wars storytelling and in a timeline of chronological story events, with some narrative exceptions in this ever-expanding saga. Part 1, Symbiotic Relationships in The Phantom Menace. In regards to the overall themes found throughout the entire franchise, in the beginning, The Phantom Menace focuses your attention to the themes of symbiotic relationships. Symbiotic relationships in our biological world can be found in three particular ways, which are mutualism, commensalism, and parasitism. These three versions of symbiotic relationships can be seen on a macro and micro level within the runtime of this thematic masterpiece. For example, the Naboo people and the Gungans both being affected by the droid invasions of the Trade Federation. Obi-Wan tells Boss Nass this.
You and the Naboo form a symbiote circle. What happens to one of you will affect the other. You must understand this.
We should know care about Naboo.
The Naboo and the Gungans live in symbiosis with a mutual advantage. This concept is best known as mutualism. Both these parties benefit from being in sync with each other, but at this point in the plot, they are on opposing sides. This parallel is blatantly stated for a thematic reason, because it ties in with the balance of the living and the cosmic force, which will be analyzed throughout this entire essay. To me, the introduction of midi-chlorians still remains to be one of George Lucas's most original and genuine contributions to science fantasy storytelling. Regardless of what people want you to think, I will explain this further and go into details using direct quotes from George Lucas himself. Now, I feel that we should break down our current understanding of the Force. The very essence of the Force is found within two different forms: the living Force and the cosmic Force, in which all things exist and cease to exist in a cyclical fashion. The origin of the Force stems from the wellspring of life, where the cosmic Force changes into the living Force, and vice versa. This concept will also be further explored when analyzing the Force priestesses and the bizarre, almost fungal-like flora that exists at the wellspring of life. Under our current understanding of the Force, we know that all living organisms are born with certain organelles within their cells that function as a purpose to live and experience life. Again, from the micro to the macro, they're simply there to exist and inevitably return back into the cosmic Force through death. But as stated in the Clone Wars, death is only the beginning. Throughout this video, I'll be sure to cite specific information for George Lucas on this matter on the biology of the Star Wars universe. But before any particular Star Wars citations, I would like to focus your attention to our real-world origins for this very concept based on primitive mythologies, religions, and storytelling. Part 2. Death as the catalyst for mythological thinking. This very concept of an invisible plane of existence after death is found in nearly all mythologies across the world. It is well researched that death, burial, and life outside this known existence is where our formations of mythologies come from. I will provide a series of insightful conversations between Joseph Campbell and Bill Moyers for the Power of Myth series filmed at Skywalker Ranch and produced by George Lucas. For those that don't know, much of the thematic storytelling in Star Wars is all rooted in our collective human experience and directly taken from the research conducted by Joseph Campbell and many anthropologists on our world's mythologies. Enjoy a segment of it here.
And then there is that final passage through the dark gate.
Well, that's no problem at all. The problem in middle life, when the body has reached its climax of power and begins to lose it, is to identify yourself, not with the body which is falling away, but with the consciousness of which it is a vehicle. And when you can do that, and this is something I learned from my myths, what am I? Am I the bulb that carries the light, or am I the light of which the bulb is a vehicle? And this body is a vehicle of consciousness. And if you can identify with the consciousness, you can watch this thing go like an old car. There goes the fender, there goes this. But it's expectable, you know? And then gradually, the whole thing drops off and consciousness rejoins consciousness. I mean, it's no longer in this particular environment.
And
I have a transcript of the entire conversation. This is actually ripped from the audiobook, The Power of the Myth. So every video you will watch will have a subsequent transcription of the actual conversation if you want to go back and read this on your own time.
you say that the image of death is the beginning of mythology. What do you mean? How is that?
Well, all I can say to that is that the earliest evidence we have of anything like mythological thinking is associated with grave burials.
And they suggest what? That men, women saw life and then they didn't see it and they wondered about it?
It must have been, I mean, one has only to, imagine what one's own experience would be. The person was alive and warm before you and talking to you. He's now lying there, getting cold, beginning to rot. Something was there that isn't there, and where is it? Now, animals have this experience, certainly, of their companions dying and so forth, but there's no evidence that they've had any further thoughts about it. Also, before the time of Neanderthal man, it's in his period that the first burials appear, of which we have evidence. people were dying and they're just thrown away. But here there's a concern.
What does that say to you?
Burials, my friend has died and he survives. The animals that I've killed must also survive. I must make some kind of atonement relationship to them. The indication is of the notion of a plane of being that's behind the visible plane and which is somehow supportive of the visible one to which we have to relate. I would say that's the basic theme of all mythology.
That there is a world?
That there is a visible plane, an invisible plane supporting the visible one. Now, whether it is thought of as a world or simply as an energy, that differs from time to time and place to place.
What we don't know supports what we do know.
That's right.
Throughout these videos, Campbell emphasizes the concept of the invisible plane in mythology, suggesting that the core themes across myth is the existence of an unseen realm supporting the visible one. He ties this notion to the idea of consciousness and aging, encouraging identification with consciousness rather than the aging body. Campbell then connects the invisible plane to the origins of mythology, saying that early evidence is linked to the graves and the contemplation of life and death. Finally, he underscores the role of the invisible plane in societal myths, highlighting how they affirm an individual's connection to a larger organism, be it a social group or a broader landscape. So, let's see how this compares to Star Wars mythology and lore. Part 3. Cellular Symphony, The Living Force, Midi-chlorians, and George Lucas's Mythical Tapestry. Every organism is connected to the Force through being alive, and after death, they return to the Force. These connections are not necessarily determined by midi-chlorians, but rather the organism's sensitivity to them, their openness to nature, and acknowledgement that the Force wills certain connections into existence. Let's take a moment to reflect on our real biological lives. The very reason you can interpret and watch this video is due to the cells in our bodies willing our actions into existence. This can be in the form of our subconscious or conscious actions when engaging with the world around us. Our interest determines our choices, but ultimately the control of our mind and our body relies on the very intricate nature of our cellular needs. When you are hungry, your body will tell you because your cells need energy. When you're active and you are breathing more because your cells need oxygen for peak function and distributing waste. Lastly, exposed to cold environments, your cells prompt shivering to generate heat, ensuring your internal temperatures remains within optimal range. Conversely, in warmer conditions, they coordinate sweat production to cool the body through evaporation. And I will go into microbiological details later in this video for further analysis and comparisons to the cells that inhabit our bodies right now and how they certainly compare to midi-chlorians in the Star Wars universe. This next series of quotes comes directly from George Lucas's discussions with Paul Duncan for the 1999-2005 prequel archives book. Midi-chlorians are the equivalent of mitochondria in living organisms and photosynthesis in plants. I simply combine them for easier consumption by the viewer. Mitochondria create the chemical energy that turns one cell into two cells. I like to think that there's a unified reality to life, that it exists everywhere in the universe, and that it controls things, but you can also control it. That's why I split it into the personal force and the cosmic force. Quote from George Lucas. Now, in this example, George is subbing personal force for living force in these quoted scenarios. The personal force is the energy field created by our cells, interacting and doing things while we're alive. When we die, we lose our persona, and our energy is assimilated into the cosmic force. If we have enough midi-chlorians in our body, we can have a certain amount of control over our personal force and learn how to use it, like the Buddhist practice of being able to walk on hot coals. The Jedi will train you to connect to your personal force and then connect to the cosmic force. You don't have much power to control the cosmic force, but you can make use of it. George Lucas. I really like this line. When we die, we lose our persona and our energy is assimilated into the cosmic force. We will definitely focus more on this concept whenever we are analyzing the direct quote stated by the Force priestesses at the Wellspring of Life in the Clone Wars episode Destiny. Before we get into the next quote from the maker, I would like to direct your attention to the wills of the Force. Now, keep in mind, the purpose and function of the wills compared to the midi-chlorians is vastly different. These two organisms are not the same, but they must also work together in harmony. Wikipedia cites several sources for these details, all within the canon or stated by George Lucas himself. They are best summarized in Wikipedia's description here. George Lucas intended the wills to be microscopic single-cell life forms who are essentially God, the will of the Force. Maintaining a symbiotic relationship with the midi-chlorians, the wills fed off the Force and controlled the universe, offering destinies to sentience such as Anakin Skywalker, who is destined to be the chosen one of the Force, to act as a tool by which the balance was restored to the Force, to restore balance and harmony to all life by destroying those who violated or would continue violating the symbiosis of life, users of corruptive, addictive force of the dark side. Individuals were controlled by the Force's will, yet they had free will. All had destiny if they wanted to follow it. The midi-chlorians were in turn symbiotes with all of life. The midi-chlorians lived in every single cell of every living thing and communicated to living beings the will of the wills, the will of the Force. George Lucas's concept of the wills aligned with the canon concept of the will of the Force, which was held by the cosmic Force. This next quote comes directly from George Lucas's discussions with Paul Duncan for the 1999-2005 prequel archive book, and this will further explain George's intentions with the wills of the Force. The wills are a microscopic single-cell life form like amoeba, fungi, and bacteria. There's something like 100,000 times more wills than there are midi-chlorians, and there are about 10,000 times more midi-chlorians than there are human cells. This is the only microscopic entities that can go into human cells are the midi-chlorians, and they are born in the cells. The midi-chlorians provide energy for human cells to split and create life. The wills are single-cell animals that feed on the Force. The more the Force there is, the better off they are. So they have a very intense symbiotic relationship with midi-chlorians, and midi-chlorians effectively work for the wills. George Lucas. For a moment, consider a planet like Dagobah, where life is abundant and the Force is extremely powerful there, which we'll loop back to later. George continues to say, it is estimated that we have 100 trillion microbes in our body, and we are made up of about 90% of bacteria and 10% human cells. So who is in service to whom? I know this is the kind of thing that fans just go berserk over because they say, we want it to be mysterious and magical, and you're just doing science. Well, this isn't science. This is just as mythological as anything else in Star Wars. It sounds more scientific, but it's fiction. It is saying there is a big symbiotic relationship to create life and to create the Force. But if you look at all the life forms in the universe, most of them are one-celled organisms. I think of one-cell organisms as an advanced form of life because they have been able to travel through the universe. They have their own spaceships. Those meteorites that we get every once in a while, they've been living on those things for thousands of years. They've been frozen, unfrozen. They can survive almost anything. The one-cell organisms have to have balance. You have to have good ones and bad ones. Otherwise, it would extinguish life. And if they go out of balance, the dark side takes over. George Lucas. An image from the famous Mars meteorite known as Allen Hills 84001. This is a very famous one where they did find microorganisms on the side of a meteorite in the 90s. I want to repeat a certain line from this entire quotation. You're just doing science. Well, this isn't science. This is just as mythological as anything else in Star Wars. It sounds more scientific, but it's fiction. The themes of science will be explored heavily when discussing Force Ghost, the Force Priestess, and the Wellspring of Life later in this video, when we were comparing it to the Sith's approach to immortality and the Jedi's approach to life after death. Part 4. The Force Within. The real science behind midi-chlorians. This next set of information comes from an older forum post written by Chris Knight that dates back to the year 2000 on theforce.net. This analysis and interpretation goes into details linking the concepts between mitochondria and our real world and midi-chlorians and the Phantom Menace. This portion of the video can be best summarized as a brief lesson in microbiology and a thematic comparison to the Star Wars universe. The comparisons in this body of text are extremely insightful, especially for the sake of comparisons between a real-life organelle and a fictional one. Chris Knight begins his research with another quote directly from George Lucas. Midi-chlorians are a loose depiction of mitochondria, which are necessary components for cells to divide. They probably had something which will come out someday to do with the beginnings of life and how one cell decided to become two cells with a little help from this other little creature who came in, without whom life couldn't exist. It's really a way of saying we have hundreds of little creatures who live on us, and without them, we would all die. There wouldn't be any life. They are necessary for us. We are necessary for them. Using them as a metaphor, saying that society is the same way, saying that we all must get along with each other. If Lucas wanted to further the theme of symbiosis between life and the Force, he could not have found a more apt illustration than with mitochondria. Not only are mitochondria required for cell division, they are required for everything in a cell. An analogous structure was needed between the cells and the Force, and midi-chlorians fill that need. So perhaps we should look at the facts behind the fiction. Mitochondria are an essential part of all living cells. They convert the nutrients, primarily carbohydrates and fatty acids, into adenosine triphosphate, or ATP, the energy currency that your cells and your entire body operate on. In animals and humans, food consumed is broken down by the digestive system into component substances, which are dispersed throughout the body by circulation. These substances osmose through cellular membranes and are converted as needed by mitochondria into ATP. When energy is required by the cell, its ATP molecules break down into adenosine diphosphate, ADP, that provides the energy, much like the internal combustion engine in your car. It also produces waste products, namely carbon dioxide, that you exhale with each breath. And you can see the molecular structure there of ATP and other molecular structure of carbon dioxide. With plants, the nutrients are taken from the soil by the root system and transported to the leaves, where chloroplast and leaf cells take the sun's light energy and convert into stored chemical energy, which is then used by the mitochondria. With plants, the production of energy is reversed from animals, with a benevolent waste product, breathable oxygen. Animals and humans produce carbon dioxide for the plants, and the plants produce oxygen for us. Symbiosis on a global scale. Mitochondria rank as the most unusual of the cell's organelles, the element of the cell that are to it what your organs are to your body. They are the smallest, only being studied by higher-powered microscopes. They are among the most numerous. Thousands may be crammed into a cell of a heart tissue. Other organelles include ribosomes, used in protein production, endoplasmic reticulum, the cell's transport system, centrioles, utilized by cell division, and others, especially the nucleus. Nucleus is the brain of the cell, and within it, usually bundled pairs of chromosomes, is the molecule of DNA, the master code of an organism's being. It is the DNA that encodes proteins composition, an complex process that ultimately decides the form and function of an organism's entirety. But the nucleus isn't the only place in the cell that DNA is found. Mitochondria have it too. And a mitochondrial DNA has become the useful tool in fields ranging from cellular biology to some branches of archaeology. When a child is conceived, he or she receives mitochondria primarily from the mother. And this matrilineal passing of mitochondrial DNA, which generally stays in the same from one generation to the next, has been used to trace migration and intermarriage patterns across the world. Most organelles are formed during mitosis or by budding off from the nucleus. Not so mitochondria. With their own DNA, they replicate on their own, another hallmark of independent life. But a mitochondrion is far from being a cell within a cell. It has been theorized that mitochondria began as simple bacteria which, engulfed by more complex cells, began producing energy for the cell in symbiosis. But some scientists point out the problems with this classification. Mitochondria have too specialized an internal structure when compared with true bacteria. And if a cell is so dependent upon mitochondria for metabolism, how did cells survive before the introduction of mitochondria? Like so much else of science currently, the question is in a state of flux. brought on by new theories and particularly new mathematics. Scientists know these things happen, just not how exactly yet. There are some gray areas that might not even be resolved in the lifetime of our grandchildren. Scientific philosophy is now closely following the scientific fact in terms of importance. All of which begs the question: mitochondria are part of microscopic life, but are they true microscopic life forms? And in our study, should the midi-chlorians of Star Wars be considered true life forms separate from their cells? Science has never fully defined microscopic limit of life. A cell is considered the basic unit of carbon-based life, the only kind we know so far. But what about viruses? Viruses have no cells, only a protein sheath protecting a core of DNA or RNA. They have nothing of metabolism, but they do reproduce by invading real cells and converting them into virus factories, churning out more viruses and killing the cell. They can be killed by high temperature chemicals, but usually an organism's immune system, such as the lymphocytes and other white blood cells that circulate the bloodstream. But are our cells defeating a real living enemy or merely engulfing a protein structure? To add to the confusion, in the last several years, we have learned of prions, bits of protein often smaller than a virus, smaller but no less dangerous. Prions are responsible for the mad cow disease that has plagued Europe, as well as other illnesses. Prion-caused diseases is proving to be remarkably tough to fight, even more so than caused by viruses. Because of their makeup and effect on the larger organisms, should prions then be considered alive? Midway between cells and viruses, there are cell organelles. Curiously, organelles have never been considered to be autonomous living entities, because on their own, they cannot survive. Take endoplasmic reticulum, the cell's transport system out of the cell membrane, and all you have is a minuscule mess. Plug out the nucleus and the cell dies. What about mitochondria? Our cells couldn't live without them, and they're worthless without our cells. The same can be said for the nucleus. Is that a symbiote life form now? Or do we give mitochondria more legitimacy because of its DNA? You can see the death of a cell right there. Qui-gon Jinn spoke of midi-chlorians residing in all living cells, the classic definition of an organelle. Do we classify it as a separate life form just because it's connected to the Force? And why would such a tiny thing be needed for the Force anyway? Qui-Gon's statement to Anakin implies that midi-chlorians are ubiquitous to life. Obi-Wan explained to Luke that the Force was created by all living things. While these two ideas come from very different places of science and mythology, we must realize that Qui-Gon's insight to midi-chlorians as pervasive organelles in all living cells prompts reflection on their classification as a unique life form connected to the Force, intertwining with Obi-Wan's explanation that the Force itself, in essence, shaped by every living being. Reflect on this for a moment, and you tell me now, who is actually in charge of your biological system? You or the 100 trillion single-cell organisms that make you up? Isn't our bodies their own very intricate version of the Force, in a constant need to balance and find harmony? Part 5, Cosmic Symbiosis and Anakin's Origins. The following is a direct quote from George Lucas from The Making of the Phantom Menace book by Laurent Bouzereau on page 8 and 9. This quote analyzes Anakin's connection to the Force through symbiotic relationships with midi-chlorians. Another major theme was the notion of symbiotic relationships, life forms living together for mutual advantage. That theme was most deftly illuminated through the character of Anakin. In the story, it is suggested that Anakin was conceived by midi-chlorians, living organisms found in cells, through which people are able to communicate with the Force. A symbiotic relationship exists between Anakin or any other person with whom the Force is strong. In the midi-chlorians, the former draws the strength, wisdom, and insight from midi-chlorians, while the midi-chlorians rely on such beings to sustain life. The midi-chlorians have brought Anakin into being as the chosen one who will balance the Force, Lucas elaborated. The mystery around the theory is that we don't know yet whether the chosen one is a good or bad person. He is to bring balance to the Force, but at this point, we don't know what side of the Force needs to be balanced. Balance would also emerge as a recurring theme in the story. The overriding philosophy of Episode 1, and all the Star Wars movies for that matter, is balance between good and evil. The Force itself breaks into two sides, the living force and the greater cosmic force. The living force makes you sensitive to other living things. George Lucas. The force is unusually strong in young Anakin Skywalker. You are intuitive and allow you to read other people's minds, etc. But the greater force has to do with destiny. In working with the force, you can find your destiny and you can choose to either follow it or not. George Lucas. Much like Qui-gon said to Anakin, your focus determines your reality. And when asked what Midi-chlorians are, this was his answer.
And sir, I don't want to be a problem.
You won't be, Annie. I'm not allowed to train you, so I want you to watch me and be mindful. Always remember, your focus determines your reality. Stay close to me, and you'll be safe.
Master, sir, I heard Yoda talking about Midi-chlorians. I've been wondering, what are Midi-chlorians?
Midi-chlorians are a microscopic life form that resides within all living cells.
They live inside me.
Inside your cells, yes. And we are symbionts with them.
Symbionts?
Life forms living together for mutual advantage. Without the Midi-chlorians, life could not exist, and we would have no knowledge of the Force. They continually speak to us, telling us the will of the Force. When you learn to quiet your mind, you'll hear them speaking to you.
I don't understand.
With time and training, Annie, you will. You will.
This next quote comes directly from page 87 of The Making of the Phantom Menace. Liam Neeson explains how this scene came to be, in George's on-set explanation and insight on midi-chlorians. Neeson's first day also included a scene with Jake Lloyd, in which the boys' high midi-chlorian count is discussed, and the nature of midi-chlorians explained. The scene had a lot of scientific dialogue, and George had to explain what it all meant and the theory behind it. He said that we all have thousands of bacteria in our systems. Suppose a particular strain had a life force that was connected to the universe. And what if some people had a stronger strain of these bacteria than others did? I thought the idea was both fascinating and believable. Liam Neeson. Let's now include the interesting fact of Anakin's importance and fatherless birth directly from George Lucas and Paul Duncan's 1999 to 2005 prequel archive novel. Keep in mind, you will see the other side of this perspective and story when we focus on the dark side manipulation of the Force from the Darth Plagueis novel. The midi-chlorians started the birth process in Anakin's mother. The wills communicated the command to the midi-chlorians, which activated the DNA that germinated the egg. That's why Anakin doesn't have a father. He was a bizarre metaphorical way touched by God. But in this case, they happen to be one-cell animals. George Lucas. Now, before anyone decides to comment that George was retroactively making the Force scientific, you must understand the very concepts of the wills and midi-chlorians dates back to its earliest drafts of Star Wars series. This next quote is stated in J.W. Rinzler's The Making of Star Wars novel. It comes directly from an interview George did on the subject in 1977. The Force gives you the power to have extrasensory perception and to be able to see things and hear things, read minds and levitate things. It is said that certain creatures are born with a higher awareness of the Force than humans. Their brains are different. They have more midi-chlorians in their cells. George Lucas. As you can clearly see, these ideas have been in Star Wars universe and George's lore on Star Wars for this entire time. In this next section, I will cite an article written by J.W. Rinzler and posted on StarWars.com about the very subject of midi-chlorians. This article was posted on June 24th, 2013, and is titled, So What the Heck Are Midi-chlorians? When Episode 1 came out, a few people were upset by the role midi-chlorians played in the Force, particularly when a drop of Anakin's blood revealed an unusually high number of them in his system. As Lucas explained in a talk with author Terry Brooks, who is about to start writing the novelization of the film, in Anakin's case, there are, instead of 1 or 2 or 3 midi-chlorians in each cell, there's like 1,000. It's unbelievable how many midi-chlorians are in there. So, what are they? Lucas expounded, I'm assuming that the midi-chlorians are a race that everybody knows about in the world of Star Wars. The way you interact and interface with this larger energy field, the Force, is through the midi-chlorians, which are sensitive to the energy. They are at the core of your life, which is the cell, the living cell. They're a symbiotic relationship with the cell. And then, because they're all interconnected as one, they can communicate with the larger force field. That's how you deal with the Force. At least a few people felt that this negated the democratic aspect of the Force, despite the fact that in Return of the Jedi, the story and the dialogue had already made it clear that the Force was, at least in some ways, hereditary. The film had lines such as, "The Force is strong in my family," which Luke tells Leia. Indeed, until that line in the film, or perhaps until we found out that Vader was Luke's father in Empire, many viewers on the very first film in 1977 might have had entertained the possibility that he or she, too, could become a Jedi. After all, Ben Kenobi hadn't said that Luke needed any special abilities or blood testing when he was asked to start his training in Episode 4. Luke just needed to learn how to tap into the mystical energy field called the Force. Lucas, even after Empire, said as much in the story conference talk with scriptwriter Lawrence Kasdan and director Richard Marquand before they started shooting Return of the Jedi. Lawrence Kasdan. "The Force was available to anyone who could hook into it?" George Lucas. "Yes, everybody can do it." Kasdan. "Not just the Jedi?" Lucas. "It's just the Jedi who take time to do it." Marquand. "They use it as a technique?" Lucas. "Like yoga. If you want to take the time to do it, you can do it. But the ones who really want to do it are the ones who are into that kind of thing, also like karate." In this, Lucas was consistent with what he'd said in the summer of 1977, the first time he'd explained in more detail many of his concepts. The Force is really a way of seeing. It's a way of being with life. It really has nothing to do with weapons. The Force gives you the power to have extrasensory perception and to be able to see things and hear things, read minds and levitate things. It is said that certain creatures are born with a higher awareness of the Force than humans. Their brains are different. The Force is a perception of reality that exists around us. You have to come to learn it. It's not something you just get. It takes many, many years. Anyone who studied and worked hard could learn it, but you would have to do it on your own. It's interesting to see, however, that in 1977, Lucas was already talking about creatures with a more natural capacity to interact with the Force. Perhaps he was already thinking of a creature such as Yoda. Perhaps, in a way, that idea morphed into Anakin, a creature born without a father, a result of the will of the Force. But the question is, does the advent of midi-chlorians really change anything? Lucas never said that regular people have no midi-chlorians, except when he was joking about Han Solo. Han Solo has no midi-chlorians, he's a zombie. In fact, he said the opposite. When speaking more seriously about them, he stated, "Midi-chlorians are like a single entity, meaning each one doesn't think individually and have a life to itself. They think as a unit because there's so many of them and they're everywhere. They're in every single cell. And sometimes there's more in one cell. Sometimes there's a whole bunch in a cell. But there has to be at least one in a cell. Otherwise, the cell can't reproduce. All cells, plant cells, every life form has a midichlorian living inside of them." So despite blood tests that show your aptitude, learning the Force is still like yoga or boxing. You have to become more life or bigger and stronger. But because we all have midi-chlorians in us, we can develop the Force to lesser or greater extents in the world of Star Wars. Thus far, we have mostly looked at direct quotations from the series creator and other supplemental commentary from other researchers in the field of Star Wars and biology. Now, we will look directly at the supplemental material in Star Wars that is both canon and legends, that cover in-universe moments from the franchise. We will further explore the lore from Darth Plagueis novel, The Clone Wars, Revenge of the Sith, A New Hope, The Empire Strikes Back, The Mandalorian, The Rise of Skywalker, and George's original intentions for his sequel trilogy. Part 6, Darth Plagueis the Wise, Themes and Conclusions in Midi-chlorian Lore. So this next set of information comes directly from an interview conducted on James Luceno with theforce.net on January 10th, 2012. How closely did you work with Lucas licensing on Darth Plagueis? How much did George get involved? And what advice did he give you? George was involved in the early stages, when the book was first proposed. I wrote to him and asked whether there was any reason why Plagueis couldn't be a non-human, and he wrote back that Plagueis could be immune and sent me some artist renderings of the character. From that point on, everything was approved, as they're saying at the highest level. I worked closely with George's right-hand man at Lucas Licensing, Howard Rothman. It was strange way to go about the book because I kind of had to bypass both Del Rey and the usual editorial staff at Lucasfilm and work directly with Howard over the course of what amounted to be a year of preparation. I submitted many versions of the outline until we finally reached a consensus on where we wanted to go with the book. The marketing text about this is canon at the highest level, I suppose that's true. That a lot of stuff came from the very top levels of Lucasfilm. Everything was approved at that high level. I had to make the assumption that Howard was speaking directly with George about a lot of this stuff. I didn't have any meetings directly with George, but it seemed like a lot of the approval was coming from him to Howard. I was not privy to all the things that happened behind the scenes. Darth Plagueis' quest to influence midi-chlorians is part of the primary storyline in the book. What do you think about the Phantom Menace's introduction to midi-chlorians? Do they dilute the fantasy aspect of the Force? Initially, I didn't like it. I thought it was going to be too limiting, and in some respects, I still feel that way. The Force was more mysterious before the introduction of midi-chlorians, but since they had become a part of the saga, there was no way around it. Based on all the talks I had with Howard and people at Lucas Licensing, there was going to have to be a primary part of the book. Everybody agreed about that. I think I found a way to make use of midi-chlorians, but I'm still not sure about it. What I did like about it was that it allowed me to play with a more rational or scientific way to investigate the Force. It allowed me to turn Plagueis into more of a scientist, more of a researcher than a mystic, although I still considered him a mystic. As the interview continues, James Luceno goes into great detail explaining his collaboration with Dave Filoni about Darth Maul's origins and the inclusion of Mother Taliesin in the Plagueis novel. As stated in the interview, to some, Darth Plagueis is still considered canon at the highest level, even after the Disney acquisition of Star Wars and the cleaning out of the Star Wars expanded universe. We have had no further updates on the character aside from one single picture in the Secrets of the Sith book, seen to the bottom left right there. In the following moments, I'll be directly pulling information from James Luceno's Darth Plagueis novel, and in particular, the portions that expand on the concept of midi-chlorians. Unfortunately, I do not have the exact page number that these passages will be from, but they are directly from the novel. I'll be sure to summarize the full body of text from the novel here on screen and on a document in a Google Link Drive in the description. There will be samples from the reading with a letter and nomenclature references on screen. This document sample reference will continue to be in the same format throughout the entire video and other Star Wars novels. Sample 1A. The first passage reference describes Darth Plagueis observing the midi-chlorians of his paralyzed and dying master, Darth Tenebrous. Plagueis is indifferent to saving Tenebrous, but is keenly interested in studying the behavior of midi-chlorians as life fades away. Plagueis possesses the ability to perceive midi-chlorians' actions through years of experimentation, although he hasn't mastered the art of manipulating them. He views midi-chlorians as interlopers, hindering direct contact with the Force. The passage explores the misconceptions that midi-chlorians are Force carriers, highlighting their role as translators of the will of the Force. Despite Tenebrous' midi-chlorians diminishing, Plagueis contemplates imposing his will on them in the future. Their passage raises questions about the behavior of midi-chlorians in Jedi and those aligned with the dark side, hinting at Plagueis' evolving understanding of these mysterious entities. Sample 1B. In this passage from Darth Plagueis, the narrative explores Plagueis' heightened connection to the Force, surpassing the need for conventional midi-chlorian blood tests. Plagueis possesses the unique ability to sense the strength of the Force in others and perceive individual midi-chlorians, a dark side skill enabling Sith to locate and initiate recruits. The dispersal of midi-chlorians at the moment of death is considered inevitable, and Plagueis reflects on his attempts to save others through prolonging their state of symbiosis with the Force. The passage introduces the concept of drawing on the energies released during death to extend one's life, paralleling the lost ancient Sith knowledge of essence transfer. Plagueis' contemplation sheds light on the challenges and complexities of manipulating midi-chlorians and the potential consequences of tampering with the natural order of life and death in the Force. We will come back to this concept of essence transfer when we cite the Rise of Skywalker's impact on midi-chlorian lore. This next passage of the summary from Darth Plagueis will do it some plot points from The Mandalorian and The Rise of Skywalker. Sample 1C. Although midi-chlorians resist manipulation that could disrupt the Force's balance, Plagueis' research suggests their passive compliance and weak-willed beings influenced by those strong in the Force. Despite the risk of tampering, there's an acknowledgement that midi-chlorians can be compelled to serve the body's needs, potentially extending life through the creation of new cells. Sample 1D, directly from the novel. So this is directly written, this is not summarized. While midi-chlorians appear to resist manipulation of that sort that might imperil the balance of the Force, they remain passive, even compliant in the case of weak-willed beings manipulated by one who is strong in the Force. Perhaps that explained why it was often easier to call on the Force to heal someone other than oneself. Extending life then could hinge on something as simple as being able to induce midi-chlorians to create new cells, to subdivide at will, increasing their numbers into tens of thousands to heal or replace damaged, aging, or metastatic cells. Midi-chlorians had been compelled to serve the needs of the body, to bestow strength when needed, to overcome physical insult, or prevent cells from reaching sentience. Sample 1E, directly from the novel. As if there were some organic differences between practitioners of the light and dark side, as if we communicate with dark side through different species of cellular intermediaries, when in fact we are animated by the same power that drives the passion of these beings gathered below. Target midi-chlorians, and we target life itself. James Luceno really understands the importance of midi-chlorians in regard to the Force. In this next series of passages, we will explore how Darth Plagueis and Darth Sidious willed a powerful organism into existence through manipulating midi-chlorians. I wonder who that organism could be. Sample 1F. In this passage, the narrative outlines Plagueis and Sidious' bold attempt almost a decade earlier, where they successfully willed the Force to shift irreversibly to the dark side. Through intense meditation and spiritual conflict, they sought to challenge the Force, achieving a tangible alteration felt by all strong in the Force. Plagueis experimented with manipulating midi-chlorians, resurrecting and repeatedly allowing Menace to die until the Bith succumbed to everlasting death. Sample 1F continued. Plagueis, intoxicated by the newfound power, attempted to rejuvenate Venomous' own body and even create a forceful being, but the Force grew silent. Animals in his laboratories succumbed to disease, and the ultimate cost and consequence remain uncertain. Despite his conviction of nearing absolute success, Plagueis hesitates to inform Sidious, emphasizing the delicate balance between their manipulations of the Force and the potential consequence awaiting them. As recovery nears completion, danger looms, and time becomes a crucial factor in the unfolding narrative. In this following passage, we will explore the outcome of their experimentations on manipulating midi-chlorians and who it created. Sample 1G. In this excerpt from the novel, Plagueis confronts Varuna, revealing his ability to manipulate midi-chlorians, causing Varuna's impending death. Meanwhile, Dooku informs Palpatine about Qui-Gon's belief in the vergence of the Force centered around Anakin, a boy conceived by the Force. Despite Dooku's skepticism, Qui-Gon sees Anakin as the chosen one. Palpatine, absorbed in his own thoughts, recalls encountering Anakin on Coruscant, but sensing nothing unusual. The discussion shifts the possibility of training Anakin, with Dooku expressing this disillusionment and revealing Qui-Gon's concerns with the Trade Federation's potential Sith involvement in the Naboo blockade. Palpatine begins to assume that the Force struck back and created Anakin as a balance to the growing dark side of the Force. This next portion is my all-time favorite moment in any Star Wars novel. The moment of realization that Anakin was this creature made from the Force that was manipulated by Darth Sidious and Darth Plagueis. Sample 1H. It was late in the evening when Plagueis made his way onto the public observatory, providing a vantage point of the landing platform where Queen Amidala's royal starship was situated. With the cowl of his hood raised, he approached a stationary macro-binocular post, pressing his eyes to the cushioned eye grips. Qui-Gon Jinn, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and a boy had arrived in a Jedi ship, while Amidala, her handmaidens and guards, and a Gungan in the air taxi ascended the starship's boarding ramp. Qui-Gon and the desert urchin stopped to converse about something that intrigued Plagueis. He pondered, what topic has summoned such an earnest look to Qui-Gon's face, and such a confused urgency in the boy? Lifting his face from the macro binoculars, he reached out with the Force and experienced a perplexing images, fierce space battles, lightsabers clashing, partitions of radiant light, a black helmeted cyborg rising from the table. When he redirected his gaze to the platform, Qui-Gon and the boy had vanished. Trying to make sense of the Force-induced images, he stood motionless, watching the starship ascend into the night. Despite his internal resistance, Plagueis couldn't deny the truth. The boy would change the course of history. Sample 1I. In this final passage, Sidious mocks Plagueis for his failed Sith philosophy. Plagueis, once confident that the old ways of the Sith were obsolete, is now facing the consequence of his own experiments. Sidious taunts him, asserting his dominance and revealing the futility of Plagueis' attempt to manipulate midi-chlorians to save himself. Sidious, revealing in his power, offers a twisted choice: die at the hands of his own failed experiments or be saved, only to face a fate worse than death. The text explores the power dynamics and twisted mentorship between Plagueis and Sidious, highlighting the inherent flaws in Plagueis' Sith ideology. A midi-chlorian narrative analysis of Darth Plagueis. This exploration of midi-chlorians unveils a thematic narrative centered around these microscopic entities as conduits of the Force. Midi-chlorians, dwelling within living cells, serve as interpreters of the Force's will. The dark side characters grapple with the manipulation, understanding, and significance of midi-chlorians, unveiling the complex relationship between life, the Force, and consequences of attempting to control these entities. The story introduces the concept that midi-chlorians are not merely carriers, but interpreters of the Force. Plagueis, through experimentation and meditation, seeks to comprehend their actions, highlighting their role as a bridge between life and the Force. The Sith are seeking immortality and creation for all the wrong reasons. Plagueis and Sidious embark on a journey to manipulate midi-chlorians, attempting to shift the balance of the Force irreversibly to the dark side. Their experiments extend to rejuvenating Plagueis' body, even creating a Force-sensitive being, emphasizing the audacious pursuit of power and control, which will lead into Anakin's unique creation. Anakin's conception, potentially guided by the Force and manipulation by Plagueis and Sidious, adds a layer of complexity to midi-chlorian's significance. The boy, believed to be the chosen one, becomes a focal point in the unfolding narrative, underlying the unpredictable nature of midi-chlorians in shaping destiny. Consequences of midi-chlorian manipulation displays the risk and outcomes associated with controlling midi-chlorians. Plagueis' experiments lead to an unforeseen challenge, including the loss of control over the Force and potential backlash from upsetting the delicate balance. Ironic. He could save others from death, but not himself. The final confrontation between Sidious and Plagueis serves as a poignant moment of irony. Plagueis, once confident in the discontinuance of the old Sith philosophies, becomes a victim of his own experimentation. Sidious mocks his master's failed attempts at manipulating midi-chlorians, highlighting the inherent flaws in Plagueis' Sith ideology. But, most importantly, the observation of Anakin by Plagueis and the realization of the boy's potential impact underline the unpredictable nature of the Force and its connection to midi-chlorians. This theme echoes throughout the passages, emphasizing the Force's role as a guiding force beyond the comprehension of even the most powerful Sith. In essence, the novel's themes explore the intricate relation between midi-chlorians and the Force, exploring the characters' ambitions, the consequences of manipulation, and the unpredictable nature of these entities in shaping the destiny of the Star Wars universe. If you haven't taken the opportunity to read or listen to Darth Plagueis' novel, I suggest you do that. It is filled with incredible dark side lore and approaches the events of the Phantom Menace from a different perspective. On the topic of Darth Plagueis, I want to analyze that pivotal scene from the opera in Revenge of the Sith from a visual perspective, metaphorical perspective, and creative perspective in regards to midi-chlorians. Then I will analyze the light side or Jedi perspective of midi-chlorians and the Force as explored by Yoda in the Clone Wars Season 6 finale. Part 7. The Force's Creation, Anakin Skywalker. This next scene and discussion point is one of the most unique moments in all of Star Wars. A 5-minute scene that is regarded by nearly everyone as one of the best scenes in the Star Wars prequels, and ironically is entirely about midi-chlorians. J.J. Abrams even regards this seduction scene as his favorite from the prequel trilogy. This next scene takes place from 42 minutes and 40 seconds to 48 minutes in Revenge of the Sith's runtime. The lore of this scene is entirely driven from the information in Darth Plagueis' novel, but told from the Chancellor Palpatine's perspective in an attempt to secretly seduce Anakin to the dark side of the Force.
You wanted to see me, Chancellor?
Yes, Anakin, come closer. I have good news. Our clone intelligence units have discovered the location of General Grievous. He's hiding in the Utapau system.
At last. We'll be able to capture that monster and end this war.
I would worry about the collective wisdom of the Council if they didn't select you for this assignment. You're the best choice, by far. Sit down. Leave us. Anakin, you know I'm not able to rely on the Jedi Council. If they haven't included you in their plot, they soon will.
I'm not sure I understand.
You must sense what I have come to suspect. The Jedi Council want control of the Republic. They're planning to betray me.
I don't think that...
Anakin, search your feeling. You know, don't you?
I know they don't trust you.
Or the Senate, or the Republic, or democracy for that matter.
I have to admit, my trust in them has been shaken.
Why? They asked you to do something that made you feel dishonest, didn't they? They asked you to spy on me, didn't they?
I don't know what to say.
Remember back to your early teachings. All who gain power are afraid to lose it, even the Jedi.
The Jedi use their power for good.
Good is a point of view, Anakin. The Sith and the Jedi are similar in almost every way, including their quest for greater power.
The Sith rely on their passion for their strength. They think inwards, only about themselves.
And the Jedi don't.
The Jedi are selfless. They only care about others.
Did you ever hear the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise?
No.
I thought not. It's not a story the Jedi could tell you. It's a Sith legend. Darth Plagueis was a dark lord of the Sith, so powerful and so wise, he could use the Force to influence the Midi-chlorians to create life. He had such a knowledge of the dark side, he could even keep the ones he cared about from dying.
He could actually save people from death.
The dark side of the Force is a pathway to many abilities some consider to be unnatural.
What happened to him?
He became so powerful. The only thing he was afraid of was losing his power, which eventually, of course, he did. Unfortunately, he taught his apprentice everything he knew. Then his apprentice killed him in his sleep. It's ironic. He could save others from death, but not himself.
Is it possible to learn this power?
Not from a Jedi.
As promised, let's take a visual look at this scene in Revenge of the Sith. This is the only portion of this video essay that is strictly from my interpretation. Visually, you have two characters watching what George deemed a Mon Calamari ballet titled Squid Lake. We are visually seeing an interesting concept of Mon Calamari swinging from spheres of water into other spheres of water with elongated tails and streamers that flow behind them. With the help from the director's commentary on Revenge of the Sith, the scene was originally going to take place in Palpatine's office. The night before the shoot, George and Rick McCallum decided that this scene should take place somewhere different. And within a night, they decided they wanted to have this scene take place at an opera house. Visually speaking, I see something more than Squid Lake. This subject matter between Anakin and Palpatine really dives into the concept of saving someone's life and the creation of life through the manipulation of midi-chlorians. In the visuals of Squid Lake, I've always interpreted that this is representing the formation of life. Quite literally, I see a sperm cell and an egg cell joining together. This, to me, is a subconscious visual symbol and may not be an intentional visual, but it is an observation I feel fits the circumstances of this scene, as pictured below. Metaphorically speaking, the scene does so much for Anakin's progression towards the dark side. This is Palpatine's first major attempt at manipulation of Anakin's fears and desires. Anakin is struggling with the fear of losing his loved ones, particularly his wife Padme and their future children. And he desires the power to prevent death. Palpatine exploits these vulnerabilities, planting seeds of doubt and temptation in Anakin's mind. The story of Darth Plagueis becomes a metaphor for the allure of the dark side of the Force and the promise of power over life and death. As Anakin listens to Palpatine's story, he becomes increasingly captivated by the idea of this forbidden power. In this context, the opera scene becomes a metaphor for the manipulation and distortion of the natural order, both in terms of the Force and the biological aspects represented by midi-chlorians. Lastly, let's analyze this scene from the perspective of the creators involved in making the movie. I'm citing this information directly from Rick McCallum and the creator's commentary in the Revenge of the Sith Blu-ray that it seemingly confirms a long-standing theory in Star Wars. Did Palpatine and Darth Plagueis aid in the creation of Anakin Skywalker? Rick McCallum, the producer of the Star Wars prequels, says this as the scene plays out. It's such a creepy little scene, just so bold and so audacious to put it in this kind of setting, and having this weird blob in front of you, music playing, and all of this. Really essential information in terms of the origins of Anakin. Palpatine's overriding, unbelievable confession of not only how he came into power, but also of this crucial element that is the hook that finally drags Anakin down. Rick McCallum's commentary underscores the significance of the scene, portraying it not only as a revelation of Palpatine's ascent to power, but also as a crucial confession regarding the manipulation of midi-chlorians to create Anakin Skywalker. The purpose of the scene was seduction, and the revelation that Anakin only contains so many midi-chlorians because he was directly conceived by the Force. This highly regarded scene is not the last mention of midi-chlorians in the Star Wars lore, but it can be seen as the last moment in the films that we explore this concept any further. Part 8. Midi-chlorians across the original trilogy. As stated previously, here we will begin to explore the concept of midi-chlorians and the theme that death is only the beginning in regards to the light side of the Force. This concept has been on screen in Star Wars since 1977, when mysteriously Obi-Wan Kenobi reached out to Luke Skywalker from beyond to tell him to use the Force when targeting the exhaust port on the Death Star. In this moment, Luke was not scared, but comforted by the voice of his former master. Luke, of course, succeeds, and the rebellion destroys the Empire's ultimate weapon. In the sequel, The Empire Strikes Back, it goes much deeper. Our hero, Luke Skywalker, sees a manifestation of his former master in the snowstorm on Hoth as Luke is on the brink of exhaustion. This manifestation is further explored throughout supplemental Star Wars material. We will explore the vague answers given by the creators and contributors of Star Wars. To continue with the original trilogy, I feel that we should look no further than the famous monologue from Yoda, who explored the wellspring of life and met the Force priestesses who revealed many secrets of the Force to him. One of Yoda's best moments comes from this pitiful scene in The Empire Strikes Back when Yoda explains why Luke cannot lift the X-Wing from the swamp of Dagobah. Luke claims that it is impossible to lift because it's too big, and Yoda responds with this.
I can't. It's too big.
Size matters not. Look at me. Judge me by my size, do you? And where you should not. For my ally is the Force, and a powerful ally it is. Life creates it, makes it grow. Its energy surrounds us and binds us. Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter. You must feel the Force around you. Here, between you, me, the tree, the rock, everywhere. Yes, even between the land and the ship.
You want the impossible.
Here, Yoda's dialogue in this instance doesn't explicitly mention midi-chlorians, but it does provide the insight into the broader understanding of the Force. Yoda emphasizes that the Force is not tied to physical size or appearance. Instead, he describes the Force as a pervasive and powerful energy that is present in all living things. It aligns with the broader concepts of the Force being an energy that connects all living things. Midi-chlorians are a biological aspect introduced to explain this connection, but Yoda's words focuses more on the interconnected nature of the Force itself. This scene is extremely important, where most fans, I believe, cite the Force should be strictly mystical. Neither thought is necessarily wrong, but if we are arguing semantics, there is far more information on the biological aspect of the Force in supplemental material provided, such as the Clone Wars. We've arrived to my favorite part. Part 9, Beyond Mortality, Yoda's Journey Through the Force. The arc and episodes I will focus my primary attention on will be the final 3 episodes of the Clone Wars Season 6. In these episodes, we witness Yoda come in contact with the Force priestesses, explore the wellspring of life, and learn the lesson on how to keep your consciousness intact after death. The first episode in the story arc is titled Voices. While Yoda is meditating on the clone army's origins, he hears the voice of Qui-Gon Jinn from the living Force. Troubled by this revelation, Yoda confides in the Jedi Council, leading to suspicions of Sith involvement. Concerned, the Council recommends a restful treatment, but Yoda, with Anakin's help, escapes the confinements of the Jedi Temple, reaching Dagobah where he encounters Qui-Gon in a unique form, a glowing swarm of light. Yoda also comments on the strength of the Force on Dagobah, in which Qui-Gon responds, "It is one of the purest places in the galaxy." Yoda proceeds to question how Qui-Gon can communicate through the Force, and he explains that I am a manifestation of the Force, a force that consists of 2 parts. Living beings generate the living Force, which in turn power the wellspring that is the cosmic Force. Yoda then questions if Qui-Gon can physically appear, but he cannot, since his training was incomplete. Qui-Gon then imparts knowledge about the living Force, the cosmic Force, and the communication through midi-chlorians. This next Qui-Gon quote summarizes the entire theme of this video essay.
All energy from the living Force, from all things that have ever lived, feeds into the cosmic Force, binding everything and communicating to us through the Midi-chlorians. Because of this, I can speak to you now.
Yoda then questions if Qui-Gon can see the future, but his response is, I exist where there is no future or past. These quotes will be further analyzed and developed as we explore the next episode titled Destiny. Qui-Gon encourages Yoda to find hope in unexpected places. Qui-Gon instructs Yoda to journey to the origin of all life for further training on retaining identity after death. This final parting of words from Qui-Gon also ties back into the concept of the Force Ghost throughout the Star Wars saga. You will learn to preserve your life force and thus manifest a consciousness that will allow you to commune with the living after death. Yoda questions how. Qui-Gon in response states, dark times are ahead. and the forces of light must remain. This is the path of only a few Jedi. You will travel to one of the origins of all life in the galaxy. The episode concludes with Yoda's departure from Dagobah with R2-D2, armed with newfound insights and a sense of hope for the future of the Jedi. In terms of midi-chlorian lore, Destiny may be my all-time favorite Star Wars story ever. Let me summarize the events of this episode chronologically, while breaking down significant parts of the story through quotations from characters and concepts directly implemented by George through Dave Filoni and the creators of the Clone Wars. Before the release of Season 7, Destiny was the penultimate episode of the series. The moral of the episode reads, "Death is only the beginning." Qui-gon Jinn directs Yoda to the mysterious planet within a golden nebula, where life thrives. The entrance's visuals are almost identical to Exegol, but through the light side of the Force, so we will explore that much later. Despite technical malfunctions, Yoda lets the Force guide his starfighter to a planet generating immense energy. Landing near a geyser, Yoda leaves R2-D2 behind and enters the geyser, discovering a flourishing and ethereal world where he encounters one of the 5 priestesses, each embodying a different emotion. The first one he encounters is Serenity, who makes a remark that Yoda is late and they have been waiting for him. Late? How did you know coming I was? Ask Yoda. We watch and study all those who are strong with the Force in the universe, Serenity responds. She then refers to the other Force priestesses as her cousins, and they represent a different type of emotion: joy, anger, confusion, and sadness. Dave Filoni once said that the Force priestesses may be one being who became 5 over a long period of time, saying, "The way that I reconciled that being is actually one being. It's one ancient being separated over a time that for our perception to be able to see her, she is these many different iconic things presented to us. But she died a long, long, long time ago. She is conscious in the Force, and she has a limited ability to manifest. The 5 separate priestesses all have varying opinions on Yoda's success at learning what Sadness calls the great gift."
His destiny is already set. It is not for us to decide.
But why him?
He is to teach one that will save the universe from a great imbalance. For this, the great gift will be his.
He has no idea what he seeks, the responsibility he will have. And do you realize what you must do, what you must face? Good. Then you won't be afraid.
Do I have a blessing that the training can begin? It is so. We are one, and one is. Do you come to us with only good intention and light in your heart? Then the blessing I give and the training will begin.
Yoda wakes up amongst very interesting plant life that look fungal in nature, and they move and bend as Serenity floats near them. She reaches out to touch one, and it instantly disintegrates, turning black and then into a bright yellow light as it floats into the wellspring of life. At this moment, Yoda questions, "What is this place?" And Serenity responds with the best dialogue about midi-chlorians in the entire saga.
What surrounds us is the foundation of life, the birthplace of what Jewish science calls midi-chlorians, the foundation of what connects the living force and the cosmic force. When a living thing dies, all is renewed. Life passes from the living force into the cosmic force and becomes one with it. One powers the other. One is renewed by the other.
In this instance, we finally hear dialogue from a Star Wars character confirming that midi-chlorians are more than just science. Serenity explicitly explains that every living thing in the universe is in a symbiotic relationship that transcends the physical and spiritual realms. In this context, midi-chlorians become a symbolic representation of the intricate balance across the universe. This also explains how in Revenge of the Sith, A New Hope, and The Force Awakens, we see pivotal characters experiencing the death of people through the Force, a drastic change in the living force. Just like George said, I know this is the kind of thing fans just go berserk over because they say, we want it to be mysterious and magical, and you're just doing science. Well, this isn't science. This is just as mythological as anything else in Star Wars. It sounds more scientific, but it's fiction. George realizes and acknowledges that within a universe, there's a delicate balance necessary for life to flourish. So Serenity then issues Yoda his trial through these words.
At death, in order for you to preserve your identity, you must know yourself, your true self, and then let go. On that island dwells all that remains unconquered, what in your existence some call evil, otherwise known as fear, all which must be finally overcome before the journey can be taken. Free yourself you must.
The Force Priest explains that at death, individuals must understand their true selves and confront the unconquered, often symbolizes fear or evil. This challenges the notion that midi-chlorians are merely a scientific concept, as they become instrumental in preserving one's identity beyond physical existence. In this metaphor, midi-chlorians are a symbolic element that contribute to the richness of the Force's lore, going beyond a merely scientific explanation. They represent the intricate balance of life, the cosmic symbiosis that defines the universe, and serve as a catalyst for personal growth and identity preservation in the face of fear and darkness. Hesitant of their test, Yoda undergoes the trials to overcome fear and confronts a dark side shadow of himself. Rejecting the shadow initially, Yoda realizes its existence within him and triumphs over it. The priestess then present Yoda with visions of temptation in the Valley of Extinction, including a grim scenario within the Jedi Temple. Yoda discerns the illusions and resists the temptation, proving his strength. As Yoda awakens, the Force priestess revealing their existence in the living Force and the cosmic Force through these lines.
Now you see, we have achieved what you seek and live between the realms.
Dead you are?
Yes.
You must face the ultimate test, the ultimate seduction, the gravest of journeys. You will travel to Moribond,
into the ancient homeworld of the Sith.
In this final episode, we explore how the Sith handle immortality, which they cannot technically achieve naturally through the means of the Force. In other canon sources, we see Sith or dark side users implement their spirit of hatred into objects, other people, and even clone bodies, but they are only prolonging their life through the dark deeds and interactions. They are in a constant state of suffering and pain, unlike the Jedi. Yoda travels to Moriband, the original homeworld of the Sith, to undergo the final test set by the Force priestess. Facing illusions and challenges, Yoda encounters specters of the Sith warriors, including Darth Bane. Meanwhile, Darth Sidious attempts to exploit Yoda's vulnerability using Sith sorcery.
Why do you come to my tomb, Jedi?
To learn.
Do you know who I am?
Yes. Darth Bane. The ancient Sith Lord, you are.
And know why I am not forgotten?
Created the rule of two. You did.
The Sith killed each other, victims of their own greed. But from the ashes of destruction, I was the last survivor. I chose to pass my knowledge on to only one. I created a legacy so resilient that now you come before me. Have you come to be my apprentice? You must kill me to gain my place.
Dead you are already.
Then what stands before you?
An illusion. Real you are not.
You do not fear me.
No. Exist you do not anymore.
The Sith think their lives live on through their apprentices and the direct rule of two. Legacy acknowledgement and history is important to the Sith, but they will never truly reach immortality through these means. They are not aware of this ability that Yoda seeks to overcome and understand. In a dark temple, Yoda encounters an illusion of Sifo-Dyas, who transforms into Darth Sidious. The illusion leads Yoda into a vision of a mission with Anakin Skywalker, where Yoda confronts both Dooku and Sidious. The vision becomes intense as Yoda tries to prevent Anakin's fall and faces Sidious in a lightsaber duel. Ultimately, Yoda sacrifices himself in the vision to save Anakin. However, as he completes his trials, Yoda awakens, realizing it was a nightmarish vision. The Force priestesses inform him that he will learn to retain his identity after death through training with Qui-gon Jinn.
Yoda. Come back to us, Yoda. In a way, the one you know as Qui-gon Jinn will commune with you and guide your training. Like us, you shall learn to maintain your consciousness after death. Enlightenment. Spirit. Balance. There is another. Skywalker.
Returning to Coruscant, Yoda keeps his experience a secret, but expresses a newfound belief that there may be a better way to achieve victory than through the ongoing Clone Wars. He hints at an unknown path to the Jedi that could lead to a long-term victory against the Sith. The episode ends with Yoda contemplating the future, and with the enigmatic words, "There is another Skywalker." The last line from the Force Priestess is particularly interesting for the lore of Star Wars because, in Revenge of the Sith, Yoda finally explains to Obi-Wan that Qui-Gon will complete his training. The one you know as Qui-Gon Jinn will commune with you and guide your training. Like us, you will learn to maintain your consciousness after death, enlightenment, spirit, balance. Part 10. Beyond Mortality, Master and Apprentice. Even throughout the Kenobi series, we see Obi-Wan reach out to Qui-Gon with no avail, until his journey is over, and he saves both Skywalker children. Obi-Wan finally overcomes his fear and dies to his former self when he learns to live without guilt. Obi-Wan encounters a Force ghost of his former master in the deserts of Tatooine, and much like the Force priestess, he says,
Master Qui-Gon.
Well, took you long enough.
Beginning to think you'd never come.
I was always here, Obi-Wan. You just were not ready to see. Come on, you've got a ways to go.
This is true because they are always there through the Force. Being able to manifest through the living Force with the cosmic Force is not an easy experience. From what we know, in canon, it's apparently very difficult to do that. The only reason we have this answer is from the certain point of view books, in particular, A New Hope's book. In this short story, Master and Apprentice, Claudia Gray conveys the concept of manifesting through the Force with these lines of dialogue. Some believe the desert to be barren. This proves only that they do not know the desert. Deep within the dunes dwell small insects that weave nets to trap one another, and burrowing snakes with the scales of color of stones so that no hunter can find them. Seeds and spores from long dead plants lie dormant in the warmth, waiting for the rainfall that comes once a year, or a decade, or a century, when they will burst into verdant life as brief as it is glorious. The heat of the sun sinks into the grains of salt until they glow, containing all the energy and possibly to become glass, the color of jewels. All of these sing individual notes in the one great song of the wills. No place is barren of the Force, and they, who are one with the Force, can always find possibility of life. Awareness precedes consciousness. The warmth is luxuriated in and drawn upon before the mind is cognizant of doing so. Next comes the illusion of linear time. Only then does a sense of individuality arise, a remembrance of what was and what is, a knowledge of oneself as separate from the Force. It provides a vantage point for experiencing the physical world and its complexity and ecstasy. But the pain of that separation is endurable only because unity will come again and soon. That fracture from the all, that memory of temporal existence, is most easily summed up with the word the fracture was once called by, the name Qui-Gon Jinn. The name is spoken by another. Qui-Gon has been summoned. He draws upon his memories of himself and takes shape, reassembling the form he last had in life. It seems to him that he feels flesh wrap around bones, hair, and skin of her flesh, robes of her skin, and then, as naturally to him as though he had been done so yesterday, he pulls down the hood of his Jedi cloak and looks upon his Padawan, Obi-Wan. It is worth the travail of individual existence just to say that name again. So he says the other name too, Ben. Later in the short story, we explore the Jedi's meaning of letting go one's former self and what that actually looks like from the perspective of Force Ghost. Qui-Gon allows his awareness to spread outward from this place until Obi-Wan is only part of the symphony of life around him. The snakes burrow deep within the sand dunes, insects spin webs among the sand, sunshine suffuses them all with warmth until Qui-Gon can let go completely, releasing his body, even his name, until he is again one with the Force. As Obi-Wan will soon learn, the most beautiful form of mastery is the art of letting go. Now that we have taken the time to explore these ideas of the Force Ghost, the light side aspect of preserving your consciousness after death, we will take a moment to reflect on the abilities that being connected to the Force can grant you even at a young age. Part 11, Grogu's Legacy. The Force Within unleashes dark ambitions and sinister experiments. When The Mandalorian launched Disney Plus in 2019, no one expected that we would have a breakout star for the first episode. Grogu is a character that made an insane impact on the cultural zeitgeist around the world, and that was for many reasons. But as Star Wars fans, there was an implication on what purpose did he serve in canon. Metaphorically speaking, he turned a bounty hunter into a father, but in universe, he was wanted by the Empire. There was hints throughout the series as to why Grogu was so valuable to the Empire, in particular Moff Gideon, but there was a moment that stands out in Season 2 that I feel we should focus in on. In Chapter 12, The Siege, we have our heroes infiltrate the last Imperial base on Navarro, so they could destroy it and rid the peaceful planet of the Empire. They are successful with their mission, but while in an Imperial facility, they learn it's not an outpost, it is a lab. In an attempt to leave before the lab blows up, they discover giant tubes full of floating, deformed humanoids and a hologram message from Dr. Pershing. For those that don't know, Dr. Pershing was a human doctor and a clone engineer affiliated with the remnant of the Galactic Empire during the New Republic era. He was tasked with extracting blood from Grogu for one of Moff Gideon's secret experiments. But it wasn't until this episode that his intentions were revealed.
Replicated the results of the subsequent trials, which also resulted in catastrophic failure. There were promising effects for an entire fortnight, but then, sadly, the body rejected the blood. I highly doubt we'll find a donor with a higher M count, though. I recommend that we suspend all experimentation. I fear that the volunteer will meet the same regrettable fate if we proceed with the transfusion. Unfortunately, we have exhausted our initial supply of blood. The child is small, and I was only able to harvest a limited amount without killing him. If these experiments are to continue as requested, we would again require access to the donor. I will not disappoint you again, Moff Gideon.
Since the Disney acquisition of Lucasfilm, M count is the closest we have ever gotten to hearing the word midi-chlorians, which for me is disappointing. Nevertheless, I feel that this experimentation on Grogu is particularly interesting because it was something that was attempted by Darth Plagueis on several organisms in his lab, all to no success. Throughout this series, you learn Moff Gideon's intentions for Grogu's midi-chlorians were far more selfish than serving the Empire as a whole. Moff Gideon was using Grogu's blood to create the perfect army, which consisted of mechanized Beskar suits and Force-sensitive clones of Moff Gideon. This might sound very pulpy, but according to Moff Gideon, he was isolating the potential to wield the Force. This concept is fantastic. But little did he know, Emperor Palpatine had already successfully done that a few years before on a distant planet only findable through traversing a dark red nebula. Part 12, The Phantom Emperor, the dark science behind Palpatine's return. Now, for this last canonical story, we will focus on the final movie in the Skywalker saga. The novelization by Ray Carson, more so than the movie, details exactly how Palpatine returned. And it was all through the help of dark science, cloning, and secrets only the Sith knew. The dead speak are the first words read by the audience, and they are true both on a contextual level and thematic level. I will return to this concept later, but consider this one for both light and dark sides of the Force. The Phantom Emperor has been waiting patiently on the Sith planet of Exegol, which mirrors the aesthetics of the Wellspring of Life. This planet is dark, crackling with lightning, and the home of the Sith Eternal cultist group. Upon Kylo Ren entering the Sith Citadel, he hears this line.
My boy, I made smoke. I have been every voice you have ever heard inside your head.
And in the novel, he ends the line with, I have been your master all along. This not only confirms Palpatine's presence in the entire sequel trilogy, but also his influence in the events post-Return of the Jedi. Palpatine puppeted Snoke the entire time, ruled the First Order in secret, and created groups of Sith cultists to follow his every order. How could this be? I thought the Jedi can only achieve immortality, but what Palpatine is doing is very different. In secret, he had been using the research of Darth Plagueis to solve this problem of immortality, and he sort of solved it from a biological point of view. Not without problems. Several problems. In the Rise of Skywalker novelization, we see Palpatine's death by the hands of Darth Vader on the Death Star 2, and the events that transpired afterwards. The excerpt of the novel reads, falling, down a massive shaft, the betrayal sharp and stinging, a figure high above, black-clad and helmeted, and shrinking fast. His very own apprentice had turned against him, the way he himself had turned against Plagueis, whose secret to immortality had been stolen. Plagueis had not acted fast enough in his own moments of death, but Sidious, sensing his flickering light in his apprentice, had been ready for years. So the falling, dying Emperor called on all the dark side power of the Force to thrust his consciousness far, far away to a secret place he had been preparing. His body was dead, an empty vessel, long before it found the bottom of the shaft, and his mind jolted to new awareness in a new body, a painful one, a temporary one. It was too soon. The secret place had not completed its preparations. The transfer was imperfect, and the cloned body wasn't enough. Perhaps Plagueis was having the last laugh after all. Maybe his secret remained secret, because Palpatine was trapped in a broken, dying form. The heretics of the Sith Eternal toiled, splicing genes, bolstering tissue, creating unnatural abominations in the hope that one of these strand casts would succeed and become worthy receptacle. The heretics would do anything, risk anything, sacrifice anything to create a cradle for their God consciousness. Nothing worked, but their efforts were not entirely in vain. One genetic strandcast lived, thrived even, a not quite identical clone, his son. But he was useless, powerless failure. Palpatine could not even bear to look upon such disappointing ordinariness. The boy's only worth would lay in continuing the bloodline through more natural methods. And it was through that eventual union, unexpected as it was, that Rey was born. The perfect vessel, strong enough to contain all the power of the Sith, his granddaughter. This passage is absolutely incredible because we now understand how a Sith can experience their version of eternal life. But again, it is not natural. Just like Palpatine says, I've died before. The dark side of the Force is a pathway to many abilities some would consider to be unnatural. This way of immortality is only expanding his life and making him grow further away from the light by manifesting his consciousness through the dark. This is selfish and the main reason Anakin couldn't save Padme from death, because it is unnatural and immoral. The living force, cosmic force, and midi-chlorians must continue to cycle. That is the great imbalance that Rey needed to resolve. and when she is given her opportunity, she hears the voices of the dead. Part 13, Beyond Wounds, exploring the depths of force healing and sacrifice. We will come back to that later. For now, we will need to focus on something else in the movie and The Mandalorian brought to light, which is force healing. This is a concept that has been in Star Wars for a long time, but we actually never saw it in live action until the third week of December in 2019. There's a scene in Chapter 7 of The Mandalorian where Greef Karga is attacked by a Reptavian that leaves an open wound with poison running through him. But in that moment, he was then healed by Grogu through the Force. The synchronicity of these moments are fantastic because later that week, with this force power, is a huge plot device found throughout The Rise of Skywalker, being used 3 times by 2 different characters. Since I am not well versed in the subject of force healing, I decided to consult Wikipedia for answers and to see if there was any involvement of midi-chlorians, and there sort of is. The user of the force healing would place their hand over the wound or wave hand towards the wounded person and pour their own life energy into it, healing the target, although at the expenditure of the user's own vitality, which could be later recovered by resting or meditating. The ability was also capable of curing the user's target of poisoning. At least in the rare case of Force Dyad, the user was able to transfer enough of their force energy to bring their target, the other half of their bond, back to life, though at the cost of their own. Part 14, Dyad and the Force, unveiling the unbreakable bond between Rey and Ben Solo. This mention of dyads perfectly ties into what I would consider one of the greatest concepts introduced in live action for The Rise of Skywalker. This entire trilogy focused on the dynamics between Rey and Ben Solo's connection to the Force, going as far as seeing each other in person in their environments, interacting with environments around each other, and passing objects to the Force. This concept and idea can only happen from what we know as a dyad connection in the Force. This has not been classified as something the living force or the cosmic force can do, but it's safe to assume their midi-chlorians are in tune with each other in some capacity. Palpatine even goes as far as to say this in the novel, as his hands, which had begun knitting themselves back together, bones regrowing, pale flesh closing over them, the life force of your bond, a dyad in the Force, a power like life itself, unseen for generations. This concept of the dyad can be best described from the Secrets of the Sith novel by Mark Sumerak, told from the perspective of Darth Sidious, and the following passage will be cited from there. There are a few secrets of the Force I have yet to master, but our Order's ancient prophecies speak of one fabled manifestation unseen for generations, a dyad. This pairing of 2 beings in the Force, linked together by an unbreakable bond, creates a power as strong as life itself. 2 that are 1. For a millennium, the Sith have adhered to the rule of 2, but this decree is said to be merely pale imitation of its predecessor, the doctrine of the dyad. Legends claim that 2 beings sharing the profound connection gain access to a great number of abilities skilled beyond the grasp of even the most powerful Force wielder. Memories of a dyad were believed to be capable of transferring their life force to heal others. Some could even pass physical objects through the time and space at an instant. If 2 Sith were bonded so deeply as they could transcend their physical beings, the power they could unlock together would know no limits. Broken bonds. The dyad is an elusive connection, one that cannot be created through will alone. My master, Darth Plagueis, attempted to forge such a bond with me. Though he was wise in his ways of the Force, he proved unworthy of the task. I, too, attempted to facilitate such a connection with my apprentice, Anakin Skywalker. Yet, even with the so-called chosen one at my side, the balance we shared paled against the perfection of the dyad. If the 2 most powerful bloodlines in the history of the galaxy, Palpatine and Skywalker, could not produce such a bond, the question remains if a dyad is possible at all. Forging the future. The doctrine of the dyad was etched into the walls of my citadel in Exegol eons ago, a constant reminder of its significance to our Order. To my Sith Eternal, the dyad is not merely the stuff of ancient legend, it is the future of the Sith, the key to unlocking the full potential of the dark side. But in a new dyad to be formed, with whom shall I share its legendary power? It is doubtful that young Kylo Ren will ever prove himself a more worthy apprentice than his grandfather, Lord Vader. Perhaps, then, my lost granddaughter will accept her birthright and rule the galaxy by my side. My visions have not yet made that clear. Only one thing is certain. When a dyad returns once more, it shall usher in a dawn of a new era, and I will be there to claim its power in the name of the Sith. Part 15. Voices of the Jedi. Rey's connection to the living and cosmic force. Which is exactly what happens, but with a slight twist towards the light. After Palpatine seemingly defeats Rey, draining her of her life force that connects her to Bim, she is lying there helpless. She quieted her mind, and with Leia's teaching, she reached out to the Force. At her most desperate hour, she asked the Force to be with me. The battle happening above her disappeared, and she saw a vast sky with stars. As novelization so perfectly explains, peaceful, light-filled, it was like she was staring through a window to somewhere else, a place between places. Be with me, her body relaxed. She embraced peace and calm the way Leia had taught her. Through the calm came a voice.
Be with me.
These are your final steps, Rey. Rise and take them.
Rey,
Rey,
bring back the balance, Rey, as I did.
in the night, find the light.
You're not alone. Alone, never. Every Jedi who ever lived lives in you.
The Force surrounds you, Rey.
Let it guide you.
Feel the Force flowing through you, Rey. Let it lift you.
Rise, Rey. We stand behind you, Rey. Rise in the Force. In the heart of a Jedi lies her strength. Rise, rise. Rey, the Force will be with you. Always.
She didn't recognize them all, but somehow she knew them the moment they made themselves known to her. They had been with her all along. She just needed to learn how to hear them. Like Leia had promised, more voices came to her fast but gentle, as though she lay at the confluence of the Force. Possibilities, futures, and past all stretching away from her, and maybe leading toward her. The cosmos, time, energy, being, nothing was the way she thought it was. All these Jedi are speaking to Rey through the living Force, and all the Jedi with her. Their spirits, strength, and force are with her. In this moment, she hears the call to balance the Force before the embodiment of the dark side takes control of the galaxy. If she did not answer this call, there would be no symbiosis. The fragile state of nature would forever change, but it remained. And after her incredible victory over the dark side, she dies. Part 16, Transcendent Bond, Midi-chlorians, the Living Force, and Cosmic Act. Rey is dead for quite some time, until Ben finds her lifeless body. He then makes the ultimate decision to give her his life force. The connection they shared allowed for this, and his living force transferred to her. He gave her his whole self, a selfless act in the Force, all for the balance of the galaxy. Let's analyze this final moment from the perspective of midi-chlorians, the living Force and the cosmic Force, to see how they could be involved with this poignant finale. The dyad between Rey and Ben Solo is a profound connection in the Force, described as a pairing of two beings strong in the Force with an unbreakable bond. This concept aligns with the idea of midi-chlorians, as they are microscopic life forms that reside in all living cells and connect individuals to the Force. The subtext of these scenes hint that their midi-chlorians are in tune with each other, enabling such a deep connection. The living Force being present in all living things is connecting them and providing a sense of the present moment. The dyad, being connection as strong as life itself, aligns to the principles of the living Force. The passage where Rey reaches out to the Force in her moment of need and hears the voices of various Jedi suggests a manifestation of the living Force, or the spirits and essence of the past Jedi guide and support her. The cosmic Force is the aspect of the Force that deals with destiny, larger events, and the will of the Force across the galaxy. The idea of the dyad, especially one that can bring balance to the Force and has potential to shape the future, resonates with the cosmic Force. Palpatine even goes as far to mention that the dyad is considered the future of the Sith, and its significance is etched in the walls of Palpatine's citadel and Exegol. Rey's ultimate act of balance is answering the call of the Jedi through the living Force, and this aligns with the concept of the cosmic Force guiding her towards her destiny. In essence, Rey and Ben Solo's unique connection serves as a central point where the Force concepts converge, thus influencing the fate of the galaxy. Part 17, George's vision, Midi-chlorians in his sequel trilogy. Let's take one step further and analyze what could have been. And let me tell you, this is absolutely my kind of weird biological Star Wars. This final section of this video essay comes from James Cameron's documentary series, Story of Science Fiction, that aired on AMC in May of 2018. James Cameron took the opportunity to interview legendary contributors to the genre of science fiction, such as Guillermo del Toro, Christopher Nolan, Ridley Scott, Steven Spielberg, and many others, including George Lucas. There are two different versions of these interviews, one that is cut for the documentary and a version of this interview that is entirely uncut for the companion novel. In the following moments, I will detail George's unfiltered and precise relationship between midi-chlorians and the Force, while alluding to George's intentions for his version of the Star Wars sequel trilogy. The interview transcriptions located between pages 91 and 119 feature James Cameron, referred to as JC, and George Lucas, referred to as GL. The provided excerpts are direct statements from George Lucas, and they serve as the sole and final remarks made by him regarding Star Wars franchise, with a particular emphasis on midi-chlorians. James Cameron says, "You're onto an interesting thing there. So many of these movies have started to reinterpret this kind of mythic element of the one, the predestined hero, the hero who must be something, whereas your heroes are heroes by choice. They get to a fork in the road, and they take the fork, and it's a choice. It's not predestination. At least I don't think that's what you're saying." George responds, "Predestination, in my mind, is your genetics. Your genes are your destiny. It's biological. People say, oh, don't put biology in it. But we all have talent. And those of us that have talent know we're different from other people. We know we can do things that other people can't do. Talk to any filmmaker, artist, or anything, and you have this sense in your head of what works and what doesn't work. Sometimes you're wrong, and it's not foolproof. But at the same time, it's something that's innate in your genetic code that makes you look at things in a particular way." In a different moment of conversation, George says, "Mars may have been like Earth and lost its atmosphere. I still think they're going to find life on Mars. I'm absolutely convinced of it. There's going to be life all over the solar system. Everybody hated it in The Phantom Menace when we started talking about midi-chlorians. There's a whole aspect to that movie that is about symbiotic relationships, to make you look and see that we aren't the boss. There's an ecosystem here." James Cameron responds, "There's an ecosystem inside us called the microbiome, and they're just learning about it." George Lucas states, "The next 3 Star Wars films, we're going to get to the microbiotic world. But there's this world of creatures that operate differently than we do. I call them the Wills. And the Wills are the ones who actually control the universe. They feed off the Force." James Cameron responds, "You're creating a religion, George." George says, "Back in the day, I used to say ultimately what this means is that we were just cars, vehicles for the Wills to travel around in. We were vessels for them, the conduit of midi-chlorians. The midi-chlorians are just the ones that communicate with the Wills. The Wills, in a general sense, they are the Force." James Cameron responds, "But you're putting detail and a facade of science around an idea that's pretty timeless, which is the spirit, the soul, heaven, causation. But in your world building, you're going back to the archetype, which is the spirit, the Godhead, all that sort of thing." George Lucas states, "All the way back to, with the Force and the Jedi and everything, the whole concept and how things happen was laid out completely from the beginning to the end, but I never got to finish. I never got to tell people about it." James Cameron responds, "It's a creation myth, and you can't build a world without creation myth. Every religion, every mythology has a creation myth." George said, "If I had held on to the company, I could have done it, and then it would have been done. Of course, a lot of fans would have hated it, just like they did the Phantom Menace and everything, but at least the whole story from beginning to end would have been told." James Cameron states, "You do not work for them." George said, "I don't anymore. I don't work for anybody anymore. I'm a free person. I have my own will." James Cameron responds, "Do you think there's alien life?" George states, "Definitely. I think it's bacteria. I think they're the only ones who have mastered space travel. I mean, they can get here from other galaxies, for God's sake." James Cameron responds, "They can just drift around for millions of years and then wake back up." George responds with, "They can live for God knows how long. You can freeze them, unfreeze them. They're life forms just like us." James Cameron states, "You're talking about panspermia, the idea that life might have originated on Earth and spread to other places, or it might have originated on Mars, let's say, and got blasted off by an asteroid and drifted here." George responds, it can grow anywhere, but it can also travel anywhere. And it's also much more hardy than humans are. It's only one cell, but it's very powerful. It's faster. It can think faster than we can. It can do all kinds of things better than we can. It's a different form of life. And I don't think we've even figured it out how it interfaces with itself. James Cameron responds, you and I probably have 2 or 3 pounds of bacteria in our body that are doing useful things for us and living in symbiosis with us. I think we could compress all of those early years in just a few years before the dinosaurs. In reality, there are about 2.5 billion years of single-celled organisms only. The history of multicellular life on Earth is only about 700 million years, which is not very much in the grand scheme. George Lucas responds, I've talked to a lot of scientists, and the area I'm interested in is that transition from 1 cell to 2 cells. They're still working on it. Now that they're beginning to get DNA of bacteria and realizing that there's billions of them, different kinds, and they do different things, that's going to be the biggest, I think, medical change we've ever had. Of course, I'm coming from the point of view that was bacteria that helped create the mitochondria, and then the mitochondria that helped create the multicellular animals. James Cameron responds, so it's not a coincidence that mitochondria sounds a bit like midi-chlorians. George responds, midi-chlorians are mitochondria. James Cameron then states, well, mitochondria are amazing, but see now you're now taking myth and religion and spirituality and putting a scientific terms to it. George responds, it's a combination of mitochondria and chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is the mitochondria of plant life. If you take those two things together, that's the source of all energy. James Cameron responds, you told me you weren't a science fiction guy, but this is classic science fiction. George then responds, I'm just a farmer sitting in my cornfield saying, what if? And then the mitochondria, if they got enough energy, they can make 2 cells. And then once you can make 2 cells, then you can make this whole world. James Cameron responds, then you can make anything. You can make us, any kind of complexity. George states, that doesn't mean to discredit the single-celled animals because there's more of them. James Cameron states, not at all. Don't we want big, cool creatures and animals and intelligent beings to interface with us? George states, that was the one issue that I had been dealing with right before I sold Lucasfilm. Everybody had hated Midi-chlorians, part of the prequel film, so much, I was simply figuring out a way to explain it that it didn't piss everybody off. Because I knew you couldn't see it, but you could see the Force. It is a powerful thing, but you can't see it. James Cameron says, but the aliens that are macro aliens, Greedo, Jar Jar, Jabba, all those guys, what are they? I think storytelling, they're just reflections of us. If we really find an intelligent species out there, it probably won't look anything like we've imagined. George states, I know we're going to find life. I know it's going to be bacteria. I know we're going to find it everywhere. All I'm saying is, which is where the leap is on the whole thing, bacteria. They are much smarter than we are. James Cameron responds, well, they've survived a lot longer than we have, so that's smarter in and of itself. George Lucas responds with, but it's about symbiotic relationships. I think personally, one of the core values we should have in the world and kids should be taught is ecology, to understand that we are all connected. Forget the mystical whatever. It's just very plain. We're all connected. What do you do to somebody here? It affects somebody there. There. It comes back to you. You have to understand that you're part of a very big picture. You're just one little part. You're a gear. You're just a little gear in this big picture. James Cameron states, but there's a beauty in that connection. There's an empowerment in that connection. George then responds, the thing I liked about the whole idea was that, yes, we are ruled, and the conquerors of the universe are these little one-cell animals, but they depend on us. We depend on them. And the idea was the Force. We say it surrounds you. It controls you. We control it. It's a two-way street. James Cameron then states, but what you're also talking about is empathy in a sense. You're talking about fear versus empathy, compassion versus aggression, the good versus the evil dichotomy. Humans have this kind of competitive aggressive side, but we have to have this cooperative side that allows us to work together, to hunt, to grow food. Those two aspects of us are always at war inside of ourselves. You took that and you wrote it large across the galaxy. The discussion between James Cameron and George Lucas represents Lucas's final remarks in the Star Wars franchise, specifically focusing on midi-chlorians. Lucas explains this concept of predestination linked to genetics and the biological aspect of force sensitivity. The discussion extends to beyond Star Wars to include Lucas's belief in the potential of existence of alien life, particularly in the form of bacteria capable of mastering space travel. The conversation seamlessly weaves between science fiction and scientific concepts, drawing parallels between mitochondria and midi-chlorians. Overall, the exchange provides insights into Lucas's unique blend of myth, religion, spirituality, and scientific exploration in the world building of Star Wars, touching on themes of symbiosis, ecology, and the interconnectedness of life. As this extremely comprehensive video essay comes to a close, I want you to reflect on everything stated here and think back to that quote from the introduction. I will now attempt to tie all these concepts together with my final thoughts on the matter of midi-chlorians' impact on our understanding of the Force. Conclusion: harmony and connection. When I was 18, I was in an automobile accident and went through a near-death experience. I was actually taken away from the scene, presumed dead, and it wasn't until I reached the hospital that the doctors revived my heartbeat and brought me back to life. This is the kind of experience that molds people's beliefs, but I have found that most of my conclusions have been evolved from observing life since that time. If I've come to know anything, it's that these questions are as unknowable for us as they would be for a tree or for an ant. Scholars who have studied myth and religion for many years have connected all these theories spawned over the ages about life and consciousness, and who have taken away the superficial trappings, have come up with the same sensibility. They call it different things. They try to personify it, deal with it in different ways, but everybody seems to dress down the fact that life cannot be explained. The only reason for life is life. There is no why. We are. Life is beyond reason. One might think of life as a large organism, and we are all but a small symbiotic part of it. It is possible that on a spiritual level, we are all connected in a way that continues beyond the comings and goings of various life forms. My best guess is that we share a collective spirit or life force or consciousness that encompasses and goes beyond individual life forms. There's a part of us that connects to other humans, connects to other animals, connects to plants, connects to the planet, connects to the universe. I don't think we can understand through any kind of verbal, written, or intellectual means, but I do believe we all know this, even if it's on a level beyond our normal conscious thoughts. If we have a meaningful place in this process, it is to try to fit into a healthy, symbiotic relationship with other life forms. Everybody ultimately is trying to reach a harmony with the other parts of the life force. And in trying to figure out what life is all about, we ultimately come down to the expressions of compassion and love, helping the rest of the life force, caring about others without any conditions or expectations, without expecting to get anything in return. This is expressed in every religion by every prophet. George Lucas's profound reflection on life and consciousness resonates with the thematic narrative of midi-chlorians within the Force. In this final quote, Lucas speaks of the unknowable nature of existence, emphasizing that the questions about life are as mysterious for humans as they would be for a tree or an ant. This sentiment perfectly mirrors the mysterious and elusive nature of midi-chlorians. Lucas's notion that life is beyond reason, akin to a large organism, aligns with the portrayal of midi-chlorians as a conduit between the physical and metaphysical realms. The interconnectedness of all life forms finds resonance in the Star Wars concept of midi-chlorians being a shared link between individuals, animals, plants, and the entire universe. The idea that there is a collective spirit or life force connecting beings mirrors the role of midi-chlorians as communicators with the wills, the entities controlling the will of the Force. Furthermore, Lucas's emphasis on striving for healthy symbiotic relationships with other life forms echoes the symbiotic relationships depicted within the Star Wars universe, particularly the emphasis on the ecosystem and symbiosis explored in The Phantom Menace. Just as Lucas advocates for expressions of compassion, love, and harmony, the Jedi are guided by their connection to the Force through midi-chlorians, embodying these values in their quest for balance and justice in the galaxy. In conclusion, George Lucas's philosophical reflections on life seamlessly intertwine with the conceptualization of midi-chlorians in Star Wars, reinforcing the idea that in both real and fictional realms, understanding the mysteries of existence involves acknowledging interconnectedness, embracing compassion, and recognizing the profound symbiosis that binds all life together. And one last thing. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't yet, make sure you like, subscribe, and comment if you want more comprehensive video essays. I really had a good time doing this. It's been about 4 months of work. a lot of sweat, a lot of struggle, a lot of late nights, a lot of long days, even working while I'm at work on this. It's been a wonderful thing, and I can't thank everyone else for watching this entire experience. And what was the last thing? Most importantly, my works cited. I do have a works cited. If you want a reference right here, here's everything that I referred to, all completely documented here, alphabetical order. You can go back and look through this. This is also in the description of the actual YouTube video where this will be posted. And yeah, stay Bombay.